everyone, I'm Devon Parfait, as Chance said, the future chief of the Grand Calliou Dulac Band of Biloxi-Chitimacha-Choctaw, and also a student at Williams College. So here's two pictures of me. The left is my grandpa and me at a powwow when I was younger, and the right is a woman named Katie Hall, who's a professor at Williams Mystic and someone who's really sparked a lot of positive change in my life. So I'm from Southeast Louisiana and originally from straight down the bayou. My family growing up consisted of me, my grandma, my grandpa, my sister, and my mom. And we had a house kind of like this one, not raised, but right on the bayou. We used to fish right off the dock. We used to crab. My friends, if you could believe it or not, would jump in the water and swim after alligators, which was kind of crazy, but they were some wild child. And we also used to go shrimping. My grandpa had a shrimp boat when I was younger, and we would go shrimping all the time. And one of my favorite memories of us is I would play with the bycatch that he would get, and there would be little puffer fish, and you would kiss the puffer fish and it would blow up, and you would throw it back in the water to release it. And it was great, living down south, be shrimping, fishing, being entrenched in my culture and with the community that I loved. But around the second grade, Hurricane and Katrina hit for me. Now, Katrina didn't devastate my family home. Katrina did do a lot of devastation in the South, though. Many people in New Orleans and all across southern Louisiana were displaced and had to move. And when Rita came, it was in the direct path of my home. And my family lost everything in that storm. We didn't have our house raised on stilts, and the inundation and water that got in caused mold to form around all of our stuff in the house. I remember the smell being so bad. My zoo books that I really loved when I was younger were covered in mold, and it was hard. It was hard to find a home after that. We moved around a lot. I ended up spending third grade in this one place north of Lake Pontchartrain, and then spending fourth and seventh grade in a place a little bit further up north. And then I moved back down to somewhere around the New Orleans area, where I had stayed in one place for eighth grade, then moved again and went to a high school in another place. And it was a lot of traveling and a lot of moving around. We were never in a stable place for more than a couple of years. And that really impacted my life. It caused me to be disconnected from my land, my people, and my culture. And my story is only part of the larger and more complex issues that Louisiana faces. Right now, we are losing a quantitative average of a football field an hour in land loss. And to understand why that's true, we have to look at some of the natural and man-made factors that cause the current land loss rates. So for Louisiana, the term coastline doesn't really apply. All of Louisiana is either at or below sea level, and large bodies of water and even smaller bodies of water get larger as sea levels rise. And here's a picture here. You can see that all of this red area is only about 0 to 1.5 meters above sea level. And southern Louisiana is pretty young. All of the southern delta is sediment from the Holocene. So that gray and that kind of greenish sediment down there is all Holocene, which is a time period after the last glacial cycle, a little over 11,000 years ago. And that is incredibly young compared to the geologic history of the entire Earth. And because it is so young, all of that clay sediment is fluffy and compacts over time in a process called subsidence. Now, when we talk about climate change, we usually talk about it as a threat multiplier. And this subsidence that happens naturally is multiplied by sea level rise due to climate change. And when you have the land sinking and sea levels rising, you get drastic land loss. Hurricanes are also responsible for the land loss in Louisiana. And when a big hurricane comes, it brings storm surge and high wave energy impacts that damages and erodes our coast and barrier islands that protects us. The storm surge and rainfall also inundates the coast. And as climate change continues, these storms are going to worsen. Just this year in the Gulf, we've had about 8 storms. And as climate change continues, there are going to be more frequent storms, higher wind speeds, and more precipitation. And in Louisiana, a lot of communities are protected by these levee systems that help to keep the water out. But if you have more storms that bring more precipitation, that water is falling into a bowl and also causing problems. And the oil and gas industry has a strong hold on Louisiana, not only physically, but it also has a hold on the people, the economy, and the land that they are exploiting in many ways. Now, the number of oil and gas wells has increased dramatically since 1941. And these are a couple pictures where you can just see the sheer content of the oil and gas industry in Louisiana. And these oil companies don't really clean up after themselves. They often leave behind remnants of their drilling operations that are contributing to the land loss and drive the issue of subsidence that I mentioned earlier. Dredging pipeline and transportation canals have also increased that rate of land loss. And you can see that these straight canals in here contrast with the winding natural water courses. And this also allows for salt water to get in and to go and move further upland. And the salt water has killed vegetation and degraded the quality of soil over time. It impacts farming and food security and affects ecosystems all around Louisiana. And all of these issues of land loss compounding onto one another is what has caused that significant land loss that we've seen, a football field an hour. And according to this USGS study, you can see that about a quarter of southern Louisiana has turned to open water from 1930 to 2010. And all of these issues are disproportionately affecting Native Americans physically and socioeconomically. It is well known that as you travel down the bayou in Louisiana, the percentage of people of color becomes greater. And so these tribes are, these 5 state recognized tribes in Southeast Louisiana are the Grand Calliou Dulac, the Ile de Jean Charles, the Pontchartrain, the Bayou Lafourche, and the Grand Bayou Village. And these natives were pushed down in the 18th century into what people thought were unlivable lands at the time. And those lands that the tribal groups settled in are experiencing some of the worst land loss in Louisiana. Now, thanks to all of the opportunities that I've been so incredibly grateful to receive, I've been able to research exactly how coastal land loss is affecting each tribal community alongside my advisor, Rona Cox. And so this study shows and analyzes the background land loss rates for Louisiana. And this portion looks at coastal Louisiana, which is losing about 0.3% of land per year. And then the Terrebonne Basin, which is losing about 0.4% per year. And the Barataria Basin, which is also losing about 0.4%. That's a lot of land loss comparatively. And there are 3 tribal groups in these basins that are experiencing these higher rates of land loss. The Grand Calliou Dulac Band, which is my tribe, the Pontchartrain, and the Ile de Jean Charles. So I learned GIS in a class and figured out how to use its tools to answer my questions. And GIS happens to be a great tool to look at land cover changes over time. And with readily available access to satellite images, it's possible to quantify those changes. So what you're seeing here on the left is a combination of blue and shortwave infrared bands from downloaded satellite imagery. And on the right, that's classified into a color gradient, which can tell us which parts of the image are land and which parts are water. And for this study, I looked at land loss over a 32-year period for those 3 tribal groups. And so the 3 tribal groups down south, they are definitely experiencing some of the highest rates of land loss in all of coastal Louisiana. Every one of them are experiencing that high rate of land loss, especially in the Terrebonne Basin and Barataria. And the Grand Calliou Dulac Band and Ile de Jean Charles are experiencing land loss that is about 0.7% per year. That is more than double the coastal land loss rate for Louisiana as a whole. 32 years ago, these areas were 2/3 to 3/4 land, and now they are half or more than half open water. And some of the tribal groups, when you talk about systematic racism these days, these tribes are graduating high school less than some other communities around the country. About 43% have less than a high school degree, and even less than that, some college or associates, and some no schooling at all. And then you get into the median household income by race. In Dulac versus Louisiana overall, and Dulac is my hometown and where I'm originally from, people are only making about $7,000 to $8,000 per year compared to all of Louisiana, and compared to the white population, which lives further up the bayou. And the US national poverty rate is about 10.5%. And in Dulac, about 28% of its residents are living in poverty. And so one of these tribal groups that we're talking about is the Îles-de-Jean-Charles. Now, you may know about the Îles-de-Jean-Charles from an article that recently came out about it being the first climate refugees. And you can see that they have lost a significant amount of land since 1971. And as you can see in these images, they are really just living on what is left of their land for as long as they can, just like many natives down south are. And you know, in this slide, you can see just how much land is being lost. And these lower incomes and lower educational attainments affect mobility and the ability to adapt to change. So like I was mentioning before, the Îles-de-Jean-Charles was named the first climate refugees. And in many ways, refugee is problematic for the tribes from a technical and pragmatic standpoint. But that's what the New York Times article said. And they applied for this competition for a $48 million resettlement plan to help move and relocate. There's a lot of pullback to resettle because people don't want to just leave their homes and their way of life. But if they had to, they would want to do it their way. And that was this plan. But you may not be surprised that they never saw any of that money. The state government thought they could not handle it and went behind the tribe's back to use that money for nothing it was intended for. So millions of dollars that could have helped to relocate Îles-de-Jean-Charles just disappeared in the state government, and we don't know what happened to it. And the Coastal Master Plan for Louisiana is an effort by the state government to address the extreme rates of land loss that we're seeing in Louisiana. It relies on the resedimentation of coastal Louisiana within 50 years. And, you know, Chief Sherrill, who is the chief of my tribe, says that we have about 25 years before our lands are completely wiped away. And we have no say in how this master plan goes. So it is no secret that all of these tribal communities are not in control of their own destiny. There are big decision makers that don't even include natives in the conversation. And we have to live with every decision and consequence that comes through. One of the most popular phrases today that's suggested when talking about tribal resettlement is managed retreat. That's scary. You know, managed by who? It's certainly not us. It's really scary for me because I'm a part of these communities getting managed as opposed to being part of the management team. There's a legacy of exploitation that goes way beyond what is happening with climate change today. And these new decisions with climate adaptation continues to pile on impact after impact on these frontline communities. It was a while before I learned more deeply about the issues that are facing tribal communities, but I knew that they existed. And when you have knowledge and understanding of issues that communities face, whether they're your own, another across the country, or even across the world, you know you can do something to help, how can you not? I knew when I was 12 years old what position I would be in and the responsibility that came with it, but I never really knew how I was going to be the best leader I could for my community. And solving all of these issues seemed so complex for me to handle. And I was, you know, never a great student and was just kind of lost thinking about, you know, what the problems were and where I was going to go in the future and how I could be a great leader. But for a while, you know, like I said, I was kind of lost and was thinking about, you know, what can I do? How can I move forward? How can I move the tribes forward? I knew that somehow education would get me there, but I was never really a great student. I failed all of my classes my freshman year of high school. I kind of got things on track when I needed to, but I kind of went through school very lackadaisical and with not much thought or effort. I would say that I learned more from YouTube than I did my high school. I was always a curious kid. I always wanted to learn, but the school system was never as engaging for me as it could have been. And I graduated with like a 1.8 GPA. I tried to apply for a 4-year university and got rejected from a couple of them, and ended up going to community college, which was probably one of the best decisions of my life, for 3 semesters, working and taking general studies just to figure out, what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. Um, and then I met Rona Cox, along with some other Williams students at a conference that I got to go to present for the tribe. So Rona was giving a presentation on the plights of Southern natives, much like I'm doing now. And I got an opportunity to go up there and speak. She let me talk on behalf of the tribes. And I ended up being a good public speaker, and I really liked it, and she thought it was good. And she saw that and heard that I was looking for an opportunity to transfer to a 4-year university. And from that point, she asked me, "Do you want to try and go to Williams?" And after meeting these Williams people who had such great personalities and were so smart, I was like, I want to be one of these people. Like, I want to go and get an education for myself. And we worked on that. It was the first time that I had ever sat in a library. I was studying for the ACT to raise my ACT score up. I sat in a library, I bought a book and got myself to study, and would sit in the library for a few days and study. It's the first time I ever really did that. And I raised my grades in community college. I got everything up as much as I could. I got my application together for Williams, submitted it, and it was rejected. They said that they didn't think I was ready for their level of coursework. And so I pivoted, and I applied for the Williams Mystic program instead, which is a maritime studies program that is funded by Williams College. It is hosted in the Mystic Seaport, but it's its own semester-long study abroad program. And with Williams Mystic, I really had no idea what to expect. I just knew that it would get me to where I wanted to be, to prove that I could handle the Williams rigor and get into Williams. And I ended up having some of the most incredible experiences of my life. One of the things that you do in Williams Mystic is you travel on a 10-day voyage in the Atlantic or the Caribbean. And that was the first time that I had ever lived in the moment. Today we are so concerned with the past and the future, and rarely do we ever get a chance to live in the moment. And being on this ship let me live in that moment for 10 days. And it was incredible and life-changing. I had so many fulfilling memories and experiences. And it was great. I got to travel from, I got to travel from coast to coast, and do original research and even visit back home with Williams Mystic. So my tribe is the tribe that Williams Mystic goes to and talks about environmental justice and coastal land loss, and climate change. And I learned that education was not this robotic and systematic thing that had beaten me down for so long. And in this first definition, you can see that the process of receiving or giving systematic instruction, especially at a school or university, and it's just this very robotic definition. I learned to more or less vibe with the second definition. Education can be an enlightening experience, and I learned that. And after I did Williams Mystic, I ended up auditing classes at Williams for a semester. Rona got me set up with a meal plan, with classes. I ended up making lots of friends, and having a great time. And along with Williams Mystic and all of these profound educational experiences that I had got, I used the new skills I gained. And I've been able to do my own research through GIS, that you heard about earlier, and prove with my own science that Native American communities are being disproportionately affected by the coastal land loss. I've been able to give talks and presentations much like this one, and bring awareness to some of the issues that are not much different from problems communities are facing around the world. And this is one of the conferences that I went to, and a couple of posters. This is the first poster that I made to go to that conference. And then we ended up working on the second poster, that included more tribes for this year's GSA conference. And it's been incredibly fulfilling to be able to advocate and talk to people about it and use my own science. And so I've been talking a lot about the negatives, but it's not all negative. Like, the future is bright. There are lots of great things to look forward to in the future. There's no doubt that land loss will continue to happen, but we can mitigate against that. We can slow it down. and we can take time to work on community development. This is a drum making session that we did at one point where they passed down to the tradition of traditional drum making. There is a backfilling project that we've been working on. The tribes have teamed up with a biologist that uses traditional ecological knowledge to help heal the coast. And there's work being done by me and others to work on a native state commission that will help us build and maintain a better relationship with our state government. And so when I talk about an interdisciplinary approach to community-based environmental justice, I mean that literally. Like, you have to give yourself the power to make positive contributions back into whatever community that you have recognized or come from, and find motivation to get through the toughest challenges, knowing that you are making a difference. And with that, I'd like to thank Rona Cox for some of the slides and images that I used, Chance for setting everything up and being my main man, getting everything together, and ASU for hosting this talk and giving me a platform to speak about things that, like I said, I'm so passionate about. So thank you.